to Restoring the Mind, where we discuss the mind and brain and all its domains. My name is Khalid Mahmood. Today's topic is Afghanistan, the next challenges. My guest this week is Miss Amina Khan. Miss Amina Khan is a director at the Center of Afghanistan, Middle East, and Africa at the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. Welcome to Restoring the Mind.
Thank you for having me.
My first question. The Taliban are projecting niceness at the moment, and they are hoping that this gets reciprocated. What if it does not? What will happen, in your opinion, if the world does not recognize the Taliban?
Mm. Well, again, this is a very interesting question, and this is something that I think is being discussed in all the major capitals of the world, particularly Pakistan. I think it is too soon to tell if the Taliban have changed or if they haven't. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we will only know once they actually take over and form some sort of a government and then actually begin to demonstrate their policies. Now, for the time being, the group's takeover has been relatively peaceful. Unlike the past, we hardly saw any violence. If there was violence, that was only from the ISKP. Apart from that, I think that they, have consistently been, disciplining their fighters not to repeat the mistakes of the past, not to do anything that harm their image, because they are trying to portray themselves as a new group that might have the same ideology for sure, but certainly a group that has evolved and progressed. Now, the group, I personally believe, has exhibited certain qualities that can signify that the group has evolved. For example, let's go to the beginning. The entire peace process that was initiated by the Taliban. The group in itself, began to write letters to the American senators, the public, as well as President Trump, and they initiated the peace process. Moreover, the fact that the group that has always been against any sort of peaceful agreement agreed and signed this Doha agreement with the Americans. Apart from that, if you see, the Taliban have become media savvy, and they also have begun to rely on diplomacy. If you see, they really have learned the art of diplomacy. They have been engaging with countries that one would never have imagined the group engaging with. For example, countries like Iran, or for that matter, even Russia. Let us not forget, in 2018 and 2019, the group used, the Russia platform to not only showcase their, agenda and principles of how they would run the future government, but they also engaged with other political factions, Afghan political factions. So certainly the group has evolved. Now, the group also talks about you know principles like nationalism and an inclusive government, a constitution that honors the rights of all. It talks about human rights. So I think the fact that the group is talking about such issues is, you know a change in itself compared to what the group was before. And also, I think another important factor that has maybe led to the change in this group is that the group knows that they cannot rule Afghanistan in entirety. They cannot monopolize power the way they did 2 decades ago. And I think they also realize that Afghanistan has evolved. Now, the country might have been at war with itself as well as the international community, but the people have evolved, and there have been certain gains during the past 20 years. And I think another significant factor is that if the group resorts back to its old ways, they will not get the recognition and the support they so badly need from the international community, particularly the region. Because I think, for the first time, I think in the history of the region, all the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan are on the same page when it comes to their policy towards Afghanistan. There is a regional consensus which entails a peaceful Afghanistan, recognition of the Taliban as a major actor, but not the sole actor, an inclusive government, and of course, you know, securing themselves from, the illegal movement of arms, drugs, and of course, transnational militant groups. So, in order to get that support and recognition, they need to legitimize their presence, even if it is within the confinement of an inclusive setup. They will have to honor their pledges and commitments. And I think the group needs to be given a chance. We have seen 20 years of so called democratic rule in Afghanistan, and that certainly did not deliver. So the group has proved that it's an indigenous group. It has stayed loyal to its cause, which has been the liberation of Afghanistan. Now we could differ on whether that's right or wrong, but I think the group realizes that it has to change its ways in order to remain relevant. And for this, it is important that the international community as well as regional countries engage with Afghanistan. I think the gravest mistake will be if, they continue to disengage by putting
How much
sanctions.
support
Hmm?
do they have from the regional players, from all its
Well,
neighbors?
Mm, mm. Well, as I just mentioned, there is regional consensus. All the immediate neighbors of Afghanistan, that is Pakistan, Iran, the Central Asians, China, and Moscow, they are all on the same page. And if you have seen, even before the group took over, they went on a regional tour and they had meetings with all the major regional stakeholders, and they assured them that once the group takes over, there will be, business will resume as usual. And when you saw the group taking over key border points, there was no disruption. And I think that is one tacit way of showing the region that we are going to deliver. So certainly, I think regional countries are more than forthcoming to work with the Taliban, but that too only when the group announces an inclusive setup. No regional country is going to recognize the group in entirety. I think this is very clear.
Okay, thank you. Next question. It
Mhm.
is a possibility that the newly established government may soon totally eradicate opium, as the
Mm,
Taliban did in the past before 9/11.
mhm,
Given the financial situation in Afghanistan, what
mhm,
options does the government have now have for the revenue generation?
mm. Well, it's very unfortunate, but the country has largely been dependent on foreign aid. I mean, the entire GDP of the country depends on foreign assistance and aid. So, that is why I think the
Maybe up to
Taliban.
some say they are up to 90% of their
Yes,
revenue was from foreign aid.
it was, of course, and if you remember, the former President Ghani always used to say that the country cannot survive for more than 3 days without that assistance. And certainly, it is unfortunate that despite the fact that you've had more than 20 years of international presence, there is very little to see on the ground apart from, Kabul city. The country has not developed the way it should have, considering the amount of money that has been pumped into the country, number one. So I think it is a little unfair to expect that the Taliban are all of a sudden going to deliver. They can only deliver if the international community and the regional countries engage. And I think the Taliban are very aware of the fact, that the international community is reluctant in engaging with them financially. Already 9.5 billion, you know, of the Afghan reserves have been frozen by the international community, which I think is very unfair
Which
and
is America,
disrespectful.
not international community, just America on its own.
Yes, but at the end of the day, I haven't seen European countries challenge that. So I mean, the diplomacy can work when regional when sorry the international community wants it to. Anyway, apart from that, my point is that you have to engage with Afghanistan and whichever dispensation comes into power, because at the end of the day, it's the common man that's going to suffer, and I think they've suffered for far too long. Now, coming to different avenues or channels for the new dispensation to try and create, you know, money for the country, that's a very tall order because, again, institutions have not been built or developed over the past 20 years for them to deliver. And I think that is why the Taliban are more interested or more dependent on regional countries to provide them with that financial aid, particularly. I think the Chinese, they're depending on that. Now, coming to your question regarding the drug trade, certainly the Taliban, during their short time in power, reduced opium cultivation to 40%, and that too without any international assistance. The group's stance on opium production and trade has been very clear. they have also admitted that, now the country is not at war, so even certain members from the Taliban can no longer depend on that war economy. But again, you see, you need to provide the farmers with an alternate source of income, and they cannot do it on their own. And that is why I keep on insisting and reiterating that they need support from international donors, the international community, and the regional countries to provide them with alternate means. The group has been very clear. It
Do you
wants
think that the new government may go to the IMF like Pakistan new government like PTI government quickly did?
No, you see, the thing is, first of all, we need to see when and if the new government is formed, how inclusive it is, and then we're going to see whether countries are going to engage and recognize that. Because you see, it's very interesting. Certain members of the Taliban leadership are still on the terrorist list, and you still have 1267, which is there, and therefore one has to see how the international community then formulates its relationship with the new dispensation, because you certainly will have Taliban members in the new dispensation. So how does that equation work out? So these are things. I think one has to be very patient here. If the international community has waited 20 years, then they need to give this new um, political dispensation some time. And I keep on saying political dispensation because it is going to be an inclusive government. There can be no other way.
Okay. If they are inclusive and the neighbors and regional players are kind of uh, pressuring them to kind of know or pushing them towards a certain direction, okay,
Mm,
my question would be that how will the world react if the government adopts Islamic socio-economic system, like they were saying that they will adopt the Sharia system, and especially with regards to the economics and finance, etc., rather than the Western secular and capitalist system. So how will the
uh,
world react then?
mm. First of all, I think it is time for the regional states as well as the international community to let the Afghans rule themselves the way they want to, whether they want to follow, the Sharia form of, economics, or the Western. That is not our problem, and it is not our prerogative. As long as the government is inclusive, as long as it delivers, as long as it's accountable and it's fair, and as long as there is no threat emanating from Afghanistan towards the region, or for that matter, the international community, it shouldn't really matter to us. From what I know, the Taliban are interested in following the Iranian school of thought when it comes to governance, but it will be more Sunni in character. Um, so one has to, I think, wait and see. I mean, we had heard that the Taliban would be announcing some sort of a government structure today, but I think the negotiations and the dialogue and the consultations within and outside the group are still going on. So I think it's too soon to speculate. But I would just say that let the Afghans rule themselves the way they want to. Foreign interference, whether it's been regional or extra regional, has caused far too much damage. And I don't think the region can afford to have more instability emanating from Afghanistan.
Okay. So, do you think the world will, especially the Americans and the Western world, they will accept, allow them to kind of introduce the Sharia law system?
Well, I think it depends on the interpretation of Sharia law, because time and again the group is saying that while certainly principles will be formed within the framework of Islamic principles and Sharia, but the group also has time and again said that they know that the world progresses and the group has evolved, and therefore they will have to evolve their policies with changing times. And I think we've seen women have returned back to workplaces. Um, Children are going back to school. So I think, as I said, the Taliban know that they cannot rule the way they did 2 decades ago. The region won't
No, I
accept
think
it. And
sorry, I didn't explain my question properly. Let me rephrase it again. I was actually referring to these financial system. If they kind of
yes,
do not adopt the Western banking system, right?
well,
Will the Western banks
uh,
allow them?
well, I think again, I think the Taliban, since they've been most of their political office has been based in Doha, I don't think they're going to follow such strict rules and principles. But certainly, they're going to follow, fair play. And I think they can find a middle ground where they can accommodate the Islamic system as well as the Western system. I think this should not be a problem because the group realizes that the country needs um, financial assistance, it needs development, it needs infrastructure, and that can only happen when you have investments coming from abroad. So I think the group is aware of that, and I don't think that should be a major factor. I think more of a factor will be the international community expecting the group to deliver on human rights, and again, the only threat that the international community faces, or the only, I think, major aspect that they're interested in, is that there should be no form of terrorism emanating from Afghanistan. I think that is all the international community cares about at the moment. That is all that's on their agenda.
Right. Let me kind of continue on the same theme.
Mm-hmm,
Given the, what happened to Morsi government in Egypt, and
mm-hmm,
they were kind of a little bit more on the Islamic side. Okay,
mm-hmm,
and the other Arab states like the Saudis and the UAE uh, did not tolerate them, and within after a year or so, they were removed from power.
mm-hmm,
What role will the Arab states play in the development of Afghanistan now?
mm. A very, very interesting question. And I think one major country that is going to play or continue to play its role is Qatar. By far, we have seen Qatar playing a very instrumental role, and I would say a very positive role as well. I think the fact that the Taliban, political office has been based in Doha has allowed the group to it's exposed the group to a moderate form of Islam, if I may say, compared to what the group saw in Afghanistan. So I think they've played an instrumental role. There is news of of Qatar and Turkey jointly, looking after the Kabul airport. I think we're going to see Qatar's role expanding because I personally feel that the international community will engage with Afghanistan through Qatar. And I think that's another important role that Qatar is going to play. Apart from that, I think, of course, Saudi Arabia and the others have played their traditional roles, but I think that should be limited to economics. For now, I think we're going to see Qatar playing a far more instrumental role. And as I just said, the international community is going to use Doha as the main channel of communication with the Taliban.
Okay. Will the new government, well, the Taliban government, allow the
Mm.
NATO countries to participate in the development of Afghanistan?
Certainly, I think they have made it very clear that while they do not welcome any sort of military presence, they are very open to developmental assistance, reconstruction, connectivity. I think they have made that very clear. And if you see, even today, the Doha office representatives had a meeting with the special rep, the German special rep on Afghanistan. So they are engaging with all the international players. They have time and again said that they want aid, they want assistance, they want engagement, but it should be not at the cost of sovereignty of Afghanistan. So they're very open to engaging. They've been even engaging with the Indians, and I think they realize, as I said, they've learned the art of diplomacy. The group has certainly evolved, and it knows, where it can get what from.
Okay. How big a risk do you think are the rebels in the long term to the development of Afghanistan? I mean, referring to what's going on in Panjshir.
Mhm, mhm. Well, look, I think it's a very interesting phenomena what's happening in Panjshir. Um, yes, by and far, I think all major political Afghan stakeholders have expressed their willingness to work and to engage with the Taliban. And by the way, the Taliban have been engaging with them for quite some time. Now, there is a resistance in Panjshir. One cannot deny that, but I do not feel that it has the same weight and the same support that it did again, say, back in the early 90s, because this time the Russians are not supporting them. If there is any support, it is coming from Tajikistan, and that's very limited. So I think, at the end of the day, it is important for the Taliban to engage. While they have been trying to engage with the resistance in Panjshir, it hasn't really worked, but there is still time to salvage the situation. So let us just hope that both sides can reach some sort of an agreement, because 2 decades or 3 decades ago, the Panjshir had a lot of external support. They do not have that anymore. And therefore, I don't think they'll be a match for the Taliban. And more so, if the Taliban forms an inclusive setup and includes other factions, other Afghan factions, that will certainly weaken the Panjshir resistance.
Okay. Have the Taliban government or Taliban group made any agreements with the Chinese about the development or anything about
Mm,
developing the infrastructure? Have they already done any kind of negotiations on that level?
mm. Again, I think it's a very interesting relationship we have seen developing over the years between the Chinese and the Taliban. The Taliban have been very forthcoming publicly as well as privately regarding their relationship with the Chinese. And I think that's very shrewd of them because they realize that Chinese is that major regional power that can certainly deliver, whether it's giving them political recognition or, for that matter, economic and developmental assistance. They have been engaging, the Beijing has hosted a number of Taliban delegations even before the process started. And the first meeting was in Urumqi, um, quite some time ago. The Chinese have also expressed their confidence in the Taliban. So I think we're going to see a major, major role of the Chinese in Afghanistan. Not only political recognition, just to add, oh, by the way, over here, do remember that it was the Chinese that played the role of a facilitator in the Eid ceasefires with Pakistan, and straight after that, the Taliban made a statement where they said that they would be very open to having Chinese as to play the role of a mediator or a facilitator. And I think that's an instrumental change coming from the group, and it also signifies the way the relationship has evolved between these two stakeholders. Now, the Chinese are very interested in extending CPEC to Afghanistan, and while President Ashraf Ghani kept on derailing the process and saying that, well, CPEC's extension could only take place once Pakistan provides the Indians with the Wagah route. The Taliban have been very categorical, saying that they need development, they need assistance, they need infrastructure, and if CPEC is extended to Afghanistan, it will make it will provide Afghanistan with that regional recognition because Afghanistan can play the role of a regional roundabout, particularly through the routes to Central Asia and then, of course, to Pakistan. So I think the Chinese and the Taliban have a very good understanding of how they see the relationship. But again, another factor that has also led to the Chinese playing a bigger role is the assurances that the Taliban have given them regarding the ETIM, the East Turkmenistan Islamic movement, which has been a major threat for the Chinese in Xinjiang. And the Taliban have said that they will not entertain any elements that oppose or pose a threat to the Chinese. So I think there are a number of factors that have you know built this relationship and made it certainly stronger. And as I said, we will see more of a prominent Chinese role in Afghanistan for sure.
Okay, my last question.
Mhm.
A couple of months back, well, maybe more than a few months back, I think somewhere in was it May or June, something like that. Uh, the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan made a statement that the Gwadar port is fully operational.
Mhm.
Is it a mere coincidence that on one side the Gwadar port is fully operational and then America leaves the region exactly at the same time?
Well, I think it could be some strange strategic coincidence, for sure. But no, I think there has been a lot of work going on, and it's high time that Gawada is developed. And the Chinese have, again, Gawada can only deliver once you have that regional connectivity, which goes from Pakistan to Afghanistan to the Central Asians, and of course then to China. So, but again, I think investment is still required. There's a lot of issues regarding security for the Chinese, not only in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So while the Gwadar port might be operational, I think there are other infrastructural and logistical angles that need to be looked at that really do depend on the situation in Afghanistan. Because let me just tell you, even if the Afghan Taliban form an inclusive government, they're going to focus on trade and these aspects a little later on. First, they have to try and consolidate the country. So I think let's just, there are a lot of conspiracy theories
Can
going
you
on.
explain that a little bit when you say consolidate the country? I mean, what exactly do you mean by the, what exactly do you think they will be doing?
Well, first of all, consolidating, by consolidation, I mean if they announce the government, they need to then take every stakeholder on board. Then they need to focus on institutions. What is going to happen to the Afghan National Army? Where is the Afghan police, the security forces, then the intelligence agency? All these, the major facets of any government to function. These are the major facets that need to be looked into. They need to be uh, reorganized. There has to be an amnesty program where all those people that have left jobs and are hiding in fear, they need to be brought back. So I think first consolidating Afghanistan, instituting the government and institutions. This is going to be the priority for the Taliban, and I think it's going to be a challenge. It's not going to be easy. And I think then the second tier will be dealing with regional countries, with trade, with infrastructure and development. But first they need to get their own house in order, and that's essential for any country to work.
I agree with you. I just wanted to thank you very much. And is there anything else that you want to add?
Well, just lastly, I just think that, the country has suffered for far too long, and the blame game has been going on for far too long with, the Americans blaming, putting all the onus on Pakistan and vice versa. I think Afghanistan is a collective and a shared responsibility. And I think, the major factor in all this is that, international community as well as regional countries continue to engage with Afghanistan and should not abandon the region or Afghanistan. I think that's the only way to move forward. And I think one should be cautiously optimistic. There's a chance to rewrite the history of Afghanistan if all major players learn to compromise and deliver on their part.
Oh, I think they will now. Thank you
Let's
very,
hope.
very much. Thank you,
Thank
Amna.
you. Thank
Thank you.